Belgium is one of the countries that continues to amaze the world, not because of its vast size or spectacular skyline, but because of the way it builds enormous projects in spaces where there is almost no room for error. On a land shaped by rivers, seaports, dense cities, and growing energy pressure, Belgium has created tunnels that dive beneath the Scheldt River, locks powerful enough to swallow giant seagoing vessels. An artificial island in the middle of the North Sea, high-voltage lines that pull energy deep into the mainland. And underground rail routes where containers move silently through the dark. What makes these projects extraordinary is that they are not built only for transportation, trade, or electricity. They reveal Belgium's ability to turn limits into design, pressure into order, and infrastructure into wonders that feel almost impossible to believe. New Lock Terneuzen, on the Westerschelde gateway to the Ghent-Terneuzen Canal, feels like a working doorway for a region shaped by tides, ships, and heavy industry. It sits inside the Noordzeesluizen complex, where vessels pass from the North Sea estuary into the canal that leads toward Terneuzen, Ghent, and the industrial core of North Sea Port. Its impact is felt in the movement of larger seagoing vessels, including ships that can now travel farther inland toward the port of Ghent, instead of stopping at older limits along the coast. From August 1, 2025, the new chamber entered full regular use, adding capacity to one of the busiest water corridors between the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. In daily operation, the benefit becomes very practical. Deeper draft ships can be handled more flexibly, and inland vessels face less waiting time as traffic flows through a wider, more capable system. The structure carries another responsibility beyond navigation. It is part of the primary flood defense, built about 3.5 meters higher than the rest of the lock complex, and prepared for rising sea levels. Trade and protection meet in the same concrete walls. Around the canal zone, that matters to factories, logistics yards, jobs, and the economic bond between Zeelandic Flanders and Flanders. New Lock Terneuzen is a threshold rather than a monument, where the North Sea, inland Europe, and the future of Ghent's port economy rise and fall with controlled water. Liefkenshoek rail link, Antwerp port, is a railway built for the part of trade most travelers never see: the silent movement of containers beneath water, docks, and industrial ground. Instead of sending freight trains through older, crowded routes around the city, this 16.2-kilometer link gives the port a direct underground connection between the left and right banks of the Scheldt, tying the Bundelzuid Yard to Antwerp Noord, one of the great rail nerve centers of the harbor. Its most striking section is the Antigoon Tunnel, a 6.75-kilometer twin-bore railway tunnel that dives under the river corridor and port infrastructure, connected by cross passages and equipped for freight traffic that must run with precision rather than drama. The project also revived the 1.2-kilometer Beveren Tunnel, a structure built decades earlier, with the idea that one day the port would need rail capacity hidden beneath the canal system. Opened in December 2014, after years of work and a cost of about €765 million, the line was created to relieve pressure on older routes, such as the Kennedy Rail Tunnel, and to draw more container traffic from roads onto trains, especially from the Deurganck Dock area. What makes it fascinating is its invisibility. Above ground, ships, cranes, and trucks dominate the scene. Below, freight trains move like a second harbor, carrying the weight of global commerce through darkness. Boucle du Hainaut. Wallonia is not a landmark you visit for beauty, but one you understand when you imagine electricity moving across a country under pressure to change. Corridors. Its proposed route stretches 84.8 kilometers through a 200-meter-wide reservation area, crossing 14 Walloon municipalities. So the project is not just a line on an energy map, but a physical presence near fields, villages, roads, and quiet local landscapes. What gives Boucle du Hainaut its weight is choice for this kind of major transmission infrastructure, where reliability matters as much as ambition. The line silent, almost abstract, yet the infrastructure that makes it real has height, distance, resistance, and a route through everyday life. In that tension, Boucle du Hainaut becomes one of Belgium's most revealing energy projects, a reminder that the transition is not only built offshore or in laboratories, but across the land people call home. Princess Elizabeth Island, Belgian North Sea, rises from the water as something almost unreal, an artificial energy island built not for people to live on, but for electricity to pass through. About 45 kilometers off the Belgian coast, in the middle of the Princess Elizabeth Zone, it will cover roughly 6 hectares, a small but powerful platform set against the restless gray of the North Sea. Its foundations are huge concrete caissons filled with sand, the kind of engineering that has to stand quietly against wind, salt, waves, and years of punishment. On the surface, the island will hold high-voltage equipment for both direct current and alternating current, plus a small harbor and a helipad so maintenance teams can reach it when the sea allows. Under the water, its real body expands outward through cables. About 60 kilometers of DC cables and 300 kilometers of AC cables will help move offshore wind power back toward land. But the island is more than a socket in the sea. It is designed as a future landing point for interconnectors with other European countries, turning Belgium into a stronger participant in a shared offshore grid. The most surprising detail is ecological. Its nature-inclusive design is meant to support marine life around the infrastructure, making this hard industrial object feel less like an intrusion and more like a new reef of the energy age. Unlike a normal airport terminal where passengers simply check in and wait, Heathrow Terminal 5 works like a layered aviation machine. Feet, more than 3.5 NFL football fields end to end, with a sweeping roof large enough to cover 5 soccer fields. Yet its real power comes from how many layers operate at the same time. Outside the glass, wide-body aircraft push back, taxi, land, and take off. Inside, passengers move through bright check-in halls, long escalators, security lanes, shops, gates, and boarding bridges. Beneath their feet, the hidden baggage system sends suitcases through about 5 miles of high-speed track and 11 miles of conveyor belts, almost like a second airport running underground. Deeper still, rail links connect the terminal back to London, turning the building into a vertical stack of aircraft, people, luggage, and trains. That is why Terminal 5 feels less like a waiting room and more like a controlled city under one roof. But this same complexity made its 2008 opening unforgettable for the wrong reason. Baggage and IT problems disrupted operations, proving that a mega-terminal only works when thousands of invisible systems move in perfect rhythm. Today, Heathrow Terminal 5 remains one of Britain's most important aviation gateways, and its most striking story is still the part most travelers never see: the hidden machinery beneath the journey. The Thames Tideway Tunnel is London's new super sewer, a hidden 16-mile system running beneath the River Thames to stop heavy rain from pushing sewage into the city's most famous river. For decades, even ordinary storms could overwhelm London's Victorian sewer system, sending more than 10 billion gallons of mixed rainwater and sewage into the Thames in a year. What makes the scale so striking is the size of the tunnel itself, about 24 feet wide, deep enough in places to sit more than 200 feet below ground, with storage capacity equal to roughly 600 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Above it, London keeps moving. Bridges, buses, riverboats, offices, apartments, and tourists along the Thames. Below it, the tunnel intercepts flows from 34 of the most polluting overflow points and sends that waste east toward treatment instead of letting it spill into the river. The construction looked like a hidden city under the surface, with giant tunnel-boring machines, 21 deep shafts, cranes along the river, and workers building one of the most important unseen systems in modern London. Now operational, the Thames Tideway Tunnel helps protect the River Thames during heavy rainfall, turning what used to be an overflow problem into waste that can be carried east for treatment through a massive system most people will never see. Extra container capacity. Antwerp is the kind of project that begins with a simple pressure: too many containers, too little room, and a port that cannot afford to slow down. Antwerp is already one of Europe's great maritime machines, sitting far inland along the Scheldt while still receiving massive ocean-going ships. At Port of Antwerp-Bruges, containers are not just cargo. They are the rhythm of global trade, made visible, stacked in steel walls, lifted by cranes, and pushed toward factories, rail yards, barges, and highways across the continent. In early 2025, the port reported container growth even while other cargo flows weakened, and longer container dwell times placed extra pressure on terminal capacity. That is where ECA, Extra Container Capaciteit Antwerpen, becomes more than an expansion plan. It is a test of how a crowded European port can grow without wasting space, losing competitiveness, or overwhelming the communities around it. The project matters because Antwerp is not an empty coastline with unlimited room. It is a dense industrial landscape shaped by water, logistics, villages, chemistry, and history. Every extra meter has to work harder. What makes ECA fascinating is this tension between speed and restraint. The world wants goods to move faster, ships are larger, supply chains are more fragile, yet the port must find capacity inside a landscape already full of consequences. In that sense, Extra container capacity Antwerp is not only about handling more boxes, it is about whether one of Europe's busiest gateways can keep growing with intelligence, discipline, and a sharper sense of space. Europa Terminal renewal. Antwerp is a project about keeping a working gateway alive while rebuilding the bones beneath it. This terminal began operating in 1990, at a time when container ships already looked enormous. Today, the vessels arriving from the Scheldt demand deeper water, stronger quays, and faster handling without long pauses in the rhythm of the port. The impressive part is not only size, but surgery. The quay wall is being renewed, the berth is being prepared for larger container carriers, and the site has to stay connected to an ecosystem where cranes, trucks, trains, barges, and warehouses move with almost mechanical precision. Around it sits one of Europe's busiest maritime engines, a port that handles hundreds of millions of tons of goods a year and links inland Europe to ocean routes through a river that reaches roughly 80 kilometers from the North Sea. PSA's full ownership of this terminal also gives the renewal a global dimension, because decisions made on this stretch of concrete affect shipping patterns far beyond Belgium. What makes the project quietly dramatic is the contrast. From the outside, it may look like steel, asphalt, cranes, and containers. Beneath that surface, it is a race to modernize an old tidal workhorse before the next generation of megaships becomes the new normal. Kieldrecht Lock, Port of Antwerp-Bruges, is where a harbor stops feeling like a place and starts feeling like a controlled ocean. The chamber stretches 500 meters long and 68 meters wide, with an operational depth of 17.8 meters below Belgium's Tideway reference level, a space so vast that a ship entering it can look almost swallowed by concrete and water. Its claim to fame is not simply length or width, but volume. When depth is counted, it remains one of the most extraordinary locks ever built, designed for the heavier, deeper draft vessels that keep reshaping global trade. Set between the Scheldt-side Deurganck Dock and the Waasland Canal, it gives ships another gateway into the left bank docks, easing pressure on Calais Lock and adding a crucial backup route so one failure does not trap a working port behind a single door. The construction numbers feel almost geological. About 1 million cubic meters of water were needed to fill it. 9.1 million cubic meters of earth were excavated, and roughly 22,000 tons of structural steel went into the works, around 3 times the steel of the Eiffel Tower. 4 sliding gates close the chamber with a quiet authority. Opened in June 2016, this is less a tourist monument than a piece of industrial choreography, where tides, ships, gates, and Europe's supply chains all pause, rise, and move again. Diablo Rail Project. Brussels Airport is remembered not simply as a railway line, but as the moment an airport station stopped being a dead end and became a crossroads. Its name comes from the shape of the tracks, a pattern like a Diablo yo-yo, with triangular links pulling the airport into Belgium's wider rail network. Before this project, trains reached the airport, almost like entering a pocket, arriving mainly from Brussels and stopping there. After it opened in June 2012, the station beneath the terminal could breathe in more directions, connecting far more naturally toward Leuven, Mechelen, Antwerp, and the Northern Corridor. From Mechelen to the airport, travel time fell from roughly 40 minutes to about 8, turning what once felt like a detour into a direct approach. Within the Brussels RER/GAN vision, Diablo became one of the pieces helping the capital and its surrounding region move less like separate islands and more like one connected system. Brussels Airport gained a new identity. No longer just an airport with a train station attached, but a rail node with international ambition, where flights, cities, suburbs, and national lines meet beneath the terminal, quietly changing how Belgium reaches the world. Liège tram. Wallonia feels less like the arrival of a new transport line and more like the return of a sound the city had lost. For decades, Liège lived without trams after its old network disappeared in the late 1960s. In April 2025, steel wheels came back to the streets, carrying a sense of memory as much as movement. The new 11.7-kilometer line runs through the city from Sclessin toward Coron-Meuse, with a branch to Bressou, threading together neighborhoods, stations, riverbanks, and public spaces that once felt more scattered. Much of its identity comes from the Meuse Valley itself. The tram does not cut across Liège like a cold piece of infrastructure. It follows the shape of the city, slipping between bridges, dense streets, old industrial edges, and the long presence of the river. The CAF Urbos vehicles give that old urban landscape a clean modern rhythm, low, white, quiet, and long enough to feel like a moving platform through the city. Streets that once belonged mainly to traffic begin to feel rearranged around people, stops, crossings, and public transport. Liège is not simply adding rails. It is changing the way the city breathes, letting an older form of mobility return in a sharper, calmer, more contemporary body. New Lock Terneuzen, on the Westerschelde gateway to the Ghent-Terneuzen Canal, feels like a working doorway for a region shaped by tides, ships, and heavy industry. It sits inside the Noordzeesluizen complex, where vessels pass from the North Sea estuary into the canal that leads toward Terneuzen, Ghent, and the industrial core of North Sea Port. Its impact is felt in the movement of larger seagoing vessels, including ships that can now travel farther inland toward the port of Ghent, instead of stopping at older limits along the coast. From August 1, 2025, the new chamber entered full regular use, adding capacity to one of the busiest water corridors between the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. In daily operation, the benefit becomes very practical. Deeper draft ships can be handled more flexibly, and inland vessels face less waiting time as traffic flows through a wider, more capable system. The structure carries another responsibility beyond navigation. It is part of the primary flood defense, built about 3.5 meters higher than the rest of the lock complex, and prepared for rising sea levels. Trade and protection meet in the same concrete walls. Around the canal zone, that matters to factories, logistics yards, jobs, and the economic bond between Zeelandic Flanders and Flanders. New Lock Terneuzen is a threshold rather than a monument, where the North Sea, inland Europe, and the future of Ghent's port economy rise and fall with controlled water. Berendrecht Lock, Antwerp, is a place where the scale of the sea is translated into concrete, steel, and controlled water. Its chamber stretches 500 meters long and 68 meters wide, wide enough to feel less like a passage and more like a rectangular basin cut into the port itself. It was built for the era when ships were growing beyond the old Panamax imagination, giving Antwerp a gate large enough for post-Panamax traffic and the heavier rhythm of global trade. A vessel enters from the tidal Scheldt, the water closes around it, and 4 massive sliding steel gates take command of the boundary between river and dock. Above the lock, road bridges rise and settle, adding another layer to the choreography. Cars, trucks, water, ships, and port machinery, all crossing the same narrow zone in different directions. The drama is quiet, almost industrially calm. Nothing looks hurried. A gate moves, a bridge lifts, a hull waits, and thousands of tons of cargo are held inside a chamber whose purpose is simply to make 2 water worlds agree. On one side is the restless Scheldt, shaped by tide and current. On the other is the controlled interior of Antwerp's right bank docks. Berendrecht Lock is not scenery in the usual sense. It is the moment where the river is disciplined into port power, and where Belgium opened a door wide enough for the next generation of ocean shipping. Coo-Trois-Ponts Pumped Storage Power Station, Wallonia, is one of Belgium's most remarkable hidden energy machines. A giant water battery, built into the Ardennes. Instead of storing electricity in cells, it stores potential in height. When power is cheap or demand is low, water is pumped up to 2 artificial reservoirs high above Coo. When the grid needs energy, That water is released back down, turning gravity into electricity. With a capacity of about 1,164 megawatts, it is Belgium's largest pumped storage plant, powerful enough to matter not only as infrastructure, but as national energy security. From above, the upper reservoirs look almost peaceful, like quiet blue basins placed among the hills. Beneath that calm surface is a system designed for speed. The plant can move from standstill to full operation in just a few minutes, giving the electricity grid a fast reserve when demand suddenly rises. That contrast is what makes the place memorable. Near the famous Coo waterfall, visitors see landscape, water, forested slopes, and a scenic valley. Behind that scenery, water is constantly being lifted, held, and released like stored time. Coo-Trois-Ponts is not simply a power station. It is a mountain-scale rhythm between nature and engineering, where Belgium uses height, water, and gravity to keep its modern grid alive. HSL1 high-speed rail line Belgium marks the moment the country stepped onto the fast spine of Europe. When service began on December 14, 1997, Brussels was no longer just a political capital connected by ordinary tracks. It became a high-speed threshold between Northern Europe, France, and the wider continental network. On this line, trains can reach 300 kilometers per hour, moving with a steadiness that makes fields, motorways, towns, and industrial edges slide past like layers of a map. The number that changed public imagination was simple: Brussels to Paris in about 1 hour and 22 minutes. At that point, the train stopped feeling like the slower alternative and became a serious rival to the plane, especially between two capitals close enough to be joined by rail, but far enough to feel transformed by speed. The line also gave Belgium its first real high-speed rail identity, linking into the LGV Nord and allowing international services such as Eurostar, TGV, and the former Thalys to run through the country with European continuity. Behind the smooth ride is a quieter kind of intelligence. TVM 430 in-cab signaling, because at 300 kilometers per hour, the driver cannot rely only on signals beside the track. HSL1 is not only steel, ballast, and overhead wire. It is Belgium learning to measure distance in minutes rather than borders. Ventilus High Voltage Project, West Flanders, is not the kind of project that announces itself with towers of glass or a dramatic skyline, but it may become one of the invisible systems that keeps Belgium's energy future alive. Stretching about 82 kilometers between Zeebrugge and Avelgem, Ventilus is designed to carry large amounts of electricity from the coast into the heart of the country, especially as offshore wind in the Belgian At 380 kilovolts, it works like an electrical highway, moving power through West Flanders and tying the region more firmly into the wider European grid. Part of the route reuses existing overhead lines, part of it goes underground, and several substations must be expanded or newly built so the system can handle the pressure of a cleaner, more electrified society. Near Bruges, a converter station will help transform electricity arriving from Princess Elizabeth Island before it flows into the Belgian network. Ventilus also forms a loop with the existing Steven high-voltage line, giving electricity more than one path to travel when maintenance, congestion, or unexpected incidents occur. What makes this project so compelling is the tension beneath it. Clean energy sounds weightless, almost pure. But the infrastructure behind it is physical, visible, and deeply connected to farmland, towns, industry, and the people who live along its route. The Oosterweel link in Antwerp begins with a problem that seems surprisingly simple. One of Europe's most important port cities is still operating around an unfinished ring road. For decades, Antwerp's R1 has carried commuters, freight trucks, and the daily pressure of a city directly tied to global trade. But Oosterweel is not simply about adding more concrete to the traffic map. The project is trying to solve a deeper urban problem, completing the northern section of the ring road, creating a long missing connection, and guiding heavy traffic into a more logical flow. At the Scheldt River crossing, the project does not rise above the water with a massive bridge. Instead, it dives beneath the riverbed, turning the waterway into a giant underground gateway. Near the Albert Canal, the engineering becomes even more complex, as multi-level tunnel sections must fit between existing traffic, port access routes, and dense urban space. The more surprising part lies above ground. Oosterweel is also tied to the goal of making Antwerp more livable, through covered road sections, green spaces, and neighborhoods that are less divided by highways. Often called Belgium's project of the century, it is a massive effort to change how a city moves, breathes, and connects. Seen from above, it is a vast construction site. But seen from the future, Oosterweel may be the moment Antwerp rebuilds its own circulatory system. Deurganck Dock. Antwerp is the moment the port steps out from behind its locks and faces the Scheldt directly. Opened in July 2005, on the left bank of the river, this tidal container dock works with the rhythm of the estuary rather than hiding from it. Ships come in from the North Sea through the Scheldt and move straight toward the quay without waiting for a lock chamber to lift or lower them into place. That single fact changes the feeling of the port. Everything is faster, more exposed, and more connected to the open water. From above, the dock reads like a long industrial incision in the landscape, bordered by about 5.5 kilometers of quay, enough edge for several giant container ships to work at once. Its walls and terminals were not shaped lightly. Roughly 1.2 million cubic meters of concrete went into holding this tidal basin in place, turning soft polder land into one of Antwerp's most powerful container gateways. The scale also carries a shadow. From its planning onward, the project stirred arguments over farmland, habitats, mudflats, and the future of the nearby village of Doel. That tension is part of its identity. Deurganck Dock is not only a machine for global trade, it is a visible line where Belgium's hunger for port capacity met the fragile land, water, and memory along the Scheldt.